I'm really happy to be here with Dr. Alicia Lieberman, and we're going to talk about things that are a mutual interest of ours. Child trauma, intergenerational transmission of trauma, and the way the field of infant mental health, in which trauma is so central, has evolved over the years. So in preparation for our discussion today, we've had a great time looking at an old Selma Freiberg film. And we also had a great time looking back at this classical volume, Clinical Studies in Infant Mental Health, that Selma Freiberg edited. We found it very interesting, I think, to read this book again after many years and seeing it, the quality of it, how classic it is. And I'd like to begin, Alicia, by asking you about this classical notion of ghosts in the nursery.
When Selma talked about ghosts in the nursery, she was talking about the reenactment of early scenes between the child who is now the parent and the current child. And the ghosts refer to the forgotten feelings that are expressed through behavior, through perceptions, and through attitudes towards the child in the here and now. Very often, people misunderstand the meaning of ghosts and think that ghosts refer to specific people in the parent's past or to specific events in the parent's past. When Selma was developing infant mental health and the treatment that she created called infant-parent psychotherapy, reality was considered important, but particular clinical focus was given to what people did with their reality, how they internalized their reality. And so ghosts really reflect to the subjective experience of early conflicts in the parent-child relationship. And it might seem like a detail, but there is a difference between unresolved conflicts and trauma. Because unresolved conflicts, which are the gist of ghosts, are internal representations of early relationships. Traumas are external events that bombard the child and make the child feel helpless in the face of terror. So here we are talking about the interface between how we internalize reality and how those memories remain in and affect the present.
So I would like to ask you, as in relation to all of this kind of classic foundations of infant mental health, do you think they're still relevant today? They were written maybe four decades ago or more, I don't know, many years ago. Are they still relevant today, you think?
More than relevant, they are foundational. I don't think that it's possible to practice infant mental health without really knowing what Selma Freiberg wrote. I think what Selma Freiberg wrote was a distillation of 100 years of wisdom about the inner life of the parent, adding the inner life of children. When she wrote about the early defenses in infancy, she was saying to the world, babies feel, babies establish coping mechanisms against overwhelming feeling, and we need to reach out to help them feel protected so they can allow themselves to feel safely. So what Selma did was essentially build bridges between an understanding of adult psychology, adult psychopathology, and an understanding that those beginnings are already in the infant, and that we need to take infants very seriously starting in the first months of life.
Are there things that, you would like to emphasize, and in your own work, in particular in child-parent psychotherapy, that are building upon Selma Freiberg but moving it into an additional realm, or that you'd like to add?
What I would like to add is speaking the unspeakable. The idea of speaking the unspeakable, I think, needs to become foundational. Even in the work of Selma Freiberg, there is an absence of words like domestic violence, physical abuse, sexual abuse. Traumas of that caliber are very, very frequent, even in families that from the outside appear to be normative families. Stressful and traumatic events are the genesis in a very high percentage of the cases of problems of mental health in childhood and later. When we talk about speaking the unspeakable, we are talking about asking parents what happened to you, and asking parents what happened to your child. And here we're talking about pre-verbal children. But as soon as children are verbal, asking them what happened to you. And children tell us. Once they feel safe that they can tell us, they do tell us. And they describe, even in front of their parents, things that they've seen in the home or things that happen to them in the home that take the parents by surprise. You hit daddy, mommy. You hit mommy, daddy. You left me. You yelled and made me scared. And the parents might say, I never realized that she noticed. So this creating a dialogue between parent and child about the things that are really frightening and painful in the relationship is something that I think needs to be done in a much more courageously direct way than it is being done now in the standard of care.
There's something about the way, speaking the unspeakable, but the way you speak the unspeakable, the way therapists learn to do it in a way that is, sensitive, tactful.
Compassionate.
Compassionate, I see, compassionate. Mm-hmm.
I think compassionate in the sense that we know that parents do not want to hurt their children, and that in finding themselves in a position of hurting their children, they are enacting the ghost in the nursery and the suppressed emotions of rage that they continue to experience that now get triggered in the face of a reminder in the moment of early experiences. And when we help them reconnect with that pain, then there is a sense of, I never realized that I was carrying all that. There is a release of feelings that have been suppressed for decades. And then there is a new empathy for how the child might be feeling in response to the way the child is being treated by the parent. And a new sense of that is not the experience that I want to give my child. That is what we call angels in the nursery.
Yes.
Is creating experience of loving connection and safety by realizing how much the pain of the past had been active outside of consciousness.
So angels in the nursery, that's actually a wonderful segue to talk a little bit about that, because that too is something that has been added on to Ghosts in the Nursery, angels in the nursery. So you were talking now about angels in the present. Is it also angels in the past, so that the people have had angel experiences together with ghost experiences? Can you explain a little bit what that means?
I like to think of life as a chiaroscuro, as an interplay of light and shadow, where moments of anger, alienation, solitude, terror are hopefully alleviated by moments of connection, love, play, joy, wonder. I think one of the reasons that children love parents who are frightening, even abusive, is that even abusive parents are not only abusive, that there are moments of wonderful intimacy in most parent-child relationships, and the child is holding on to those moments, hoping that they will come back. And when we talk to parents about what happened to you and what happened to the child, we ask very specifically about traumatic experiences, stressful experiences, adversities, the whole continuum from stress to trauma. But we invariably follow those questions with a question about what were experiences of feeling safe, loved, protected that you had while you were growing up. And when parents remember and tell us those experiences, it's as an antidote to what they had just told us about the fear that they had. And those experiences of benevolence and of lovingness serve as guides for what they want for their child. We ask them, what about that memory of feeling loved and protected would you like to use as you think of what kind of care you want to offer your child? In the very traumatized population that we serve, between 30 and 50% of parents cannot remember an experience of being loved or protected as children. And when that happens, we say to parents, you know, moments of loving connection can be built anytime. And here and now, as you and me and your child are going to be meeting together, we will build them together. We will find ways that you really connect with your child and give your child the experience that you wish you had had as a young child. So we go back and forth between the past and the present.
So Alicia, in one of our discussions that we had in preparing for today, you made this statement. You said the field of infant mental health has to stand by children in their dark moments of fear, sorrow, when they're yelled at, when their pain is ignored, when their experience is unseen. And you added that these traumatic moments were those in which ghosts were created, but also where we might be able to intervene and prevent the trauma from becoming consolidated and becoming a ghost in a way. So it's really putting together the Selma Freiberg emphasis with your emphasis on current trauma, weaving it together into one story. Can you elaborate on that? Can you explain that?
Yes. I am very grateful to Bowlby for bringing reality to the sphere of infant mental health. Reality at the level of what happened to the child and how does the child understand what happened. There is some irony in the fact that attachment theory made its initial greatest contribution by saying, let's observe child behavior, infant behavior. Let's observe avoidance. Let's observe contradictory behaviors that say two things at the same time, approach avoidance, etc. It did not ask in response to what. There was an implicit assumption that the mother was the only source of reality. And what we now know happens is that the mother is one very crucial source of reality, but that children from the very beginning are observing what happens around them, including what happens to the mother, and deriving conclusions about it. And when children witness violence, and when they have an abusive caregiver, even if it's not the mother, those influences make an indelible impact in them. And we need to enable them to tell us about those experiences and to trust that the mother and the father can open themselves to the child's experience, and that we can serve as translators for the parent of the child's experience in a way that makes it bearable for the parent, where the parent is sufficiently protected by our compassion, but also by our expectation of protection on their part to do the job that they need to do as caregivers for the child. We see ourselves as providers of meaning for the child's behavior, for the child and for the parent, by saying there is a connection between what happened and what the child is doing. And we say to the parent, and we say to the child, and we say to both of them together, so that the dialogue is around reality and the reaction to reality at the level of emotion and at the level of behavior. Does that answer your question?
I think it does. There seems to be a growing awareness of trauma, or at least the term is used more and more. Has this made a real difference in the practice, in the reality of lives of children, now that this is much more in the awareness, the common awareness?
I think it's still in the realm of aspirational. I think it is a major contribution, and I think that speaking about the realities of children's lives is enabling children to think more freely about what happened to them, and it's enabling the adults who care for children to think more clearly about what are the circumstances of children's lives. Where it remains aspirational is in helping service providers in a variety of disciplines to speak the unspeakable in a way that is supportive and that provides children and families with access to the resources that they need to address their very difficult circumstances. the pervasiveness of trauma is partly a social failure. It is the social failure to provide a decent standard of living, sustainable employment, safe housing, safe policing, safe neighborhoods, so that there is a continuum from lack of social justice to personal trauma. And to think of trauma informed only at the personal level is really blaming the victim. I think that the violence in our streets, the violence in our communities, is a rupture of the social contract where government and institutions and civic structures need to serve the people in a way that protects their dignity. I think we have racism, discrimination, inequality, poverty, which are the roots of traumatic experiences in a very high percentage of the cases. And so I think we need to create systems of care at the level of the government fulfilling its responsibility to the people, that acknowledges that trauma is not only a personal experience, it is also a failure of civic duty.
As I mentioned earlier, we had been observing this old film of Selma Freiberg. Grainy, black and white as it is, it does bring back the uniqueness of her special style. She talks about the rights of all babies to be cherished, to be comforted in pain, and to see joy in the face of a partner. Had she been with us, what would she think? What would you like to ask her? What would you like to share with her? I don't know.
Well, you know, I think she would be thrilled at the way infant mental health has become a mature discipline. When she started, the infant mental health practitioners in the world fitted around a table. And now there are thousands. I love the fact that she used the word joy, because joy in life, wonder, the sense of appreciating relationships, appreciating the world, was really what she was about. And as I remember her, the moments of being supervised by her were really moments of creating angels in the nursery for me as a clinician. And to this day, in situations where I feel lost, in a supervisory moment or in a clinical moment, going back to the sense of confident safety that she conveyed is what serves as a secure base for going forward. She would be shocked at our persistent failure to enact social justice on behalf of infants and families. She would be so upset at our continued failure to give babies and families what they need. And I think that is the chiaroscuro, yet again, that we know so much more and we continue to willfully not put it into action. And I think that is the challenge for us and the people that we are teaching. Infant mental health as social justice.